You know what I love? The ocean. Unlike Subnautica 2, which apparently wants nothing to do with it. Now, stop. Don't point your finger at me because you think I didn't finish the first game. I did, and truth be told, that's kind of why I'm disappointed with the new one. The original Subnautica built a brand new experience which allowed players to explore the vast, scary, and story-filled ocean as you try to piece together the disease of planet 4546b. The stakes are placed in front of you immediately as you awake as the sole survivor of the Aurora crash. You are Riley Robinson. You get one chance to try to make it out. And then we contrast that with the second game. Dying is a part of the story. I mean, look, it's even a recommendation as a quest. Why? It's treated so casually here. Now, I can appreciate their attempt of trying to build a new idea. I do. But how do you take a game seriously that fails to take itself seriously? Horror lives and dies on commitment. The moment you hand the player a safety net, you've told them the monster isn't real. I love my story games, and I feel it's important to create a journey that encompasses your world. But lore-implemented respawn beacons don't fit in that genre. Dying shouldn't just feel like a minor setback. It should cost you something. Your progress, your confidence, your willingness to go back down there, into the ocean. In Subnautica 1, when a Reaper Leviathan ended your run, you felt it. You were terrified. The only thing you gained from that encounter is knowing you needed to mentally prepare for next time. We respawn back in time because story-wise, you only get one life. You are Riley Robinson. Now what's happening in the second game? Well, first of all, the developers have stated that they don't want to make a fighting game. And honestly, it shows. Combat and fighting of any sort have been entirely stripped away from the game. Okay, fine, maybe no combat could work. But I bet you're expecting a great replacement to the system, right? Some kind of deterrent against the entire fear of the first game? Nope. Any hands-on approach has been replaced with flares now. If you don't have one, you can only run away. In the survival game. I think there's a lot to say about horror games that refuse to have weapons. PT acts as a very strong example in this case, with its limited room and lack of weapons, adding severely to the fear factor of the game. However, games like Resident Evil are able to utilize weapons effectively to give you a sense of false safety, when in reality, the guns in the game are nothing more than a temporary deterrent with limited ammunition. But despite this, you feel like you are making an impact in the environment. This is important, as you no longer feel like you're watching a movie as a passive observer, but rather, you're actually participating in the story. The first Subnautica made you feel small, but it made you feel scrappy. Now you're just small. If you wanted to kill a Leviathan in the first game, you technically could. Same with Resident Evil. It would just be incredibly difficult, but damn well rewarding knowing you don't have to deal with that threat anymore. In Subnautica 2, in all honesty, deaths just feel needlessly avoidable and repeat as annoyances. Why do I need to craft flares to deal with the same shark over and over? Why do tiny creatures damage me when I'm hitting them with my survival tool? Why can't I do anything to defend myself or improve my situation? Because Subnautica 2 doesn't want you to feel vulnerable, it wants you to feel powerless. And it's important to note that these are not the same thing. And that's the root of the problem. In the first game, within the first hour, players encounter stalkers just beyond the safety of the starting area. They then witness the cinematic explosion of the Aurora ship and the spread of radiation across the map. These events immediately establish the world's dangers, mysteries, and priorities. As a result, exploration and survival become essential to the game, as we discover what happened to the other survivors visually through the several destroyed lifeboats. The world itself delivers the story, and therefore, the gameplay that follows becomes interesting as well. Now, let's look at what discovery looks like in Subnautica 2. The voice actors do a great job, and this was seen from the first game as well. But this is all you really get. The abandoned bases become a bit repetitive. There's been one small detail of the game that I haven't touched on yet, and that's been the multiplayer edition of the second game. Amazing! We've been waiting for this since modding tools were trying to create this in the first game. Sure, the temporary player models at the moment don't give you a lot to work with, but you're exploring this new SeaWorld with your friends. That in itself is the joy. However, two issues. First of all, the feeling of forced powerlessness is amplified when you're with your friends. You start the game feeling unstoppable and capable, Like together, you can finally push back against the world that kept you on the defensive alone. Think Minecraft when you open up that brand new world knowing you're about to create something incredible. But Subnautica 2 doesn't really let that dynamic form. Even with another player beside you, you're still operating within the same narrow loop of avoidance and retreat. Now when looking at the playstyle, different submarines, and different defensive mechanics, from the first game it feels a little ridiculous that you can't do the same. I'm not asking the developers to let us murder every living being on this planet, I'm just asking us to actually participate in our environment. Instead, the gameplay loop shrinks down to collecting food, collecting water, and slowly upgrading your base while everything else is something you simply avoid. So why is this all that I can do? I feel weaker with my friend than I did in the first game as Riley fricking Robinson. And I feel like when we look at the game through that lens, it makes sense to write a respawn bay as a part of the story. The game is telling us that yes, you are going to die. But don't worry, that's actually a mechanic of the game, so it's okay. That to me feels a little lazy. Second of all, horror in Subnautica doesn't only come from what is chasing you, it also comes from being alone while it happens. The first game worked because isolation did half the heavy lifting, and honestly, sound design understood that, and played a large part in that as well. Without the isolation, the survival aspect of the game becomes more powerful than the horror part. But that's not an issue. Games like Sons of the Forest work really well for this. Even in multiplayer, the horror and fear of the night create tension, which is even more unsettling as you sit panicked with your friend. You're no longer just exploring fear in this open world game, you're actually trying to keep it back, knowing that you could only ever keep the cannibals off you for now. But when the survival elements of your game is the strong point, you're expected to sell that. I didn't find that similar feeling in Subnautica. I'm currently only playing the early access version of the game, so of course there is room for improvement, but unless major changes are made, I'm a little scared that fundamentally, this gameplay loop won't change much. I'm very excited for the new submarines to come out, as I loved ocean exploration in my very own trailer submarine, but that also makes me question, why are we in early access? Well, that brings us to the lawsuit of the game. Well, production was halted by the parent company Krafton since they fired leadership from Unknown Worlds. The story goes that Krafton agreed to pay $3.12 to Unknown Worlds co-founders for every dollar of revenue every time the studio's revenue topped $70 million in a single month. Yeah, a messy jumble of promises. All you gotta know is by delaying the game, Krafton wouldn't have to pay up to $250 million. So they fired the leaders, which then sparked a lawsuit. Look, Krafton's CEO even tried to use ChatGPT to get out of his trouble. This delayed the game quite a bit, yet we're still somehow in early access. I'll be keeping my eyes on this game, but I won't be holding my breath in anticipation. With that, I'd love to be proven wrong, of course, as time progresses. My name is Alex, this has been Carrot Makes. Drop a like and subscribe if you get the chance, and otherwise, I'll see you next time.